Welcome back to the Chad Hasty Show, News Talk 95.1 FM and 790 AM KFYO. We go to the phones. And joining us this morning, GOP political strategist Matt Mackowiak. Matt, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Chad. I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing wonderful. Appreciate you taking your time today to join us on the show. I want to start off with the race between Ted Cruz and Beto O'Rourke. Obviously, it's been getting a lot of play since a couple of polls that came out last week showed Ted Cruz up anywhere between 2 and 6 percentage points. I know a lot of conservatives have dismissed those polls, including some within the Cruz camp, maybe, or you know, those who are polling for Cruz camp have dismissed those polls. But Senator Cruz is out, and including this weekend, and saying, no, we've got a real race on our hands. Is Cruz trying to build this up larger than it really is, or does Cruz have a real threat from Beto O'Rourke, in your opinion?
Well, as Senator Cruz said on Saturday at the Resurgence gathering in Austin, you know, you had three polls come out on last week. I think they each had Cruz up, but it was 6%, 4%, and 2% in terms of the margins. Now, you know, I know there are other polls out there that show Cruz with a more comfortable lead. Exactly what the reality is hard to know. Obviously, polls are only as good as their sample, and samples are based on who pollsters think will turn out. And really, samples related to polling are not really worth all that much till after Labor Day because it's so hard to poll in the summer. It's hard to reach people. People aren't paying attention to these races. Normal people aren't anyway. But look, here's the fact. The fact is that O'Rourke has outraised Cruz. O'Rourke has raised more money than any Democratic Senate candidate in the country. And he appears to be on track to continue raising serious money. I think just over the weekend, he raised another $1 million in response to Ted Cruz's first TV ad. So, look, the thing that interests me about where we are right now, Chad, is, you know, O'Rourke is benefiting from really being able to, you know, campaign and do these events and really not have any contrast delivered at this point. And I think that pretty soon, I imagine either right after Labor Day or maybe even before Labor Day, the Cruz campaign, I think, will start educating Texans about what O'Rourke's positions actually are. And so O'Rourke has had, you know, a good amount of national attention. He works really hard. He does a lot of these events all over the place. Cruz has been, you know, kept in D.C. by Senate work, and that's limited his ability to campaign. But O'Rourke has a problem. He has, you know, 5 or 6, you know, positions on major issues that are well outside the mainstream of where the state of Texas is. And I don't think he's really paid any price for that politically yet in Texas. I think when he does, you'll start to see this race go back to where it ought to be, which is an 8 or 10 or 12-point race.
You know, one thing that's also surprised me a little bit is that while O'Rourke has raised his name ID at least somewhat in Texas, there's still a lot of people who don't know who he is.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, you know, it's a reminder of, you know, how hard it is to raise your name identification on a statewide level. It's one of the reasons why members of Congress have had such a terrible track record of running for statewide offices in Texas, because I think even elected officials sometimes forget exactly how big Texas is. 30 million people, 20 media markets with at least one daily newspaper and one local television station. It's an immense state. You can spend 2 weeks doing nothing but traveling the state, and your name ID might go up 5% if you're lucky. So really, it's a state you can't do retail in, and O'Rourke spent a lot of last year doing retail, you know, building up, you know, these events around the state, particularly in small towns, and that took a lot of time and a lot of determination. But I don't know that it was necessarily the best strategy. He needed to really be, you know, raising his name identification in the big markets and the suburbs. Yeah. And ultimately, that may be a big problem for him in terms of the ultimate margin.
Earlier, I said it has not been a high bar for him to hurdle, but he is the best statewide Democrat on the ballot as far as campaigner goes. Who do you think right now has just been a disaster so far for the Democrats on the statewide? I mean, I know we have a handful to choose from, but it just seems like other than Beto O'Rourke, none of them are gaining any kind of traction with anybody. And you don't hear much about them other than on maybe social media and complaining about debates.
That's exactly right. You know, to me, I think that the most obvious disaster in terms of the Democratic statewide ticket, it's really not close. It's Lupe Valdez. In some ways, her story is actually fairly impressive in terms of her personal life and her professional career. But she's got some big problems, and she's running a campaign. She's probably been outraised by, I would say, 32 of the 36 Democratic.
Oh, we lost Matt Mackowiak. That happens sometimes when you're on a cell phone. It happens from time to time. Try to get him back on real quick there, Jody, and we'll let Matt finish what he had to say. Sometimes when you're on a cell phone, it cuts out from time to time. We'll get Matt Mackowiak back on here in a second. O'Rourke is, when we were talking there for a second about Ted Cruz and Beto O'Rourke, Cruz is bringing up everywhere he goes the race and how close he is. And Valdez, she is a disaster. She's been a disaster. I think she'll continue to be. We got Matt Mackowiak back on the line. Hey, Matt.
Sorry, Chad. I'm sorry about that.
I was just
saying that, Lupe's been a disaster. She has $200,000 in the bank. She's not going to be able to go on television in any meaningful way, probably not able to go on radio in any way. She doesn't have enough money to run for Congress, let alone run for governor. And she's really not made Abbott play defense on anything.
Right.
Look, substantively, she's limited. She's had a terrible track record fundraising. She goes days at a time, if not weeks at a time, where you really don't hear anything from her. I don't really know what they're doing. I suspect she's had a tough time keeping staff and really, working in an effective way. So Abbott's going to, I think, have a very strong margin in that race. But as you said, really the whole statewide ticket, with the exception of Beto O'Rourke, has been underwhelming at least, and has had really no ability to get traction, to raise money, to get attention, or to make the Republican incumbents play defense.
From the Resurgent gathering over the weekend, what were some of your final thoughts on the speakers, the lineup? Who did you find the most interesting?
Yeah, and it was great to see you there and join your show live from Austin on Friday. Look, it's an interesting conference. It's an outgrowth of the old Red State gatherings that I went to over the years. And it was interesting. Obviously, we had Governor Abbott and Senator Cruz both attend and speak. So for the Texans that were there was a lot of interest in that. The one real takeaway, Chad, that I was most interested in is you had a number of speakers, U.S. senators, members of Congress, who consistently went back to the deficit and the debt and fiscal issues as a major threat facing the future of the country. That was a major theme, and I think you're going to see more attention on that among conservatives going forward.
Yeah, I imagine you're right on that. Matt, it was good to see you this past weekend, and we will talk to you again here in about a week.
Sounds good. Thanks, Chad. Take care.
That's Matt Mackowiak.